Here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here. Today on the big program, lots to get to, lots to talk about, new jobs in Ohio, more stuff on the Trump-Giuliani crazy train front, all kinds of wow. Also, Texas back in the news, more stuff, lots to get to today. But I wanted to start with the thing that just... I spent about 20 minutes today just watching 14 seconds of tape over and over and over again. Woman goes to her school board, and there's been a lot of craziness at school board meetings. You know, most people didn't even know where the local school board was until the last election, when Republicans, and to their credit, look, they know how to get the base all outraged. They know how to feed them the outrage candy, get them all lathered up and all wadded up in the panties. They do it well. And then they direct that anger very effectively. You have to give them credit for what they're able to do. They're able to, enrage the poorly educated and then point them in the direction of, oh, go get them. And school board meetings, now the latest go get them. First it was get your government hands off my Medicare, and now it's get your government hands out of education and teaching kids what to learn. Don't do it. Now Virginia, interesting place. They had the whole theory about race that's critical or whatever was going on then. Angry over that, and had an executive order day one. Never going to teach it. Not going to do it. And undid any mask mandates. The governor there, Youngkin, executive order right away. Because remember when Republicans were against executive orders? Yeah, I do too, but I digress. Did away with those. Left it to the school boards. Got to keep the people enraged at the school boards. So this woman, Amelia King, very upset that her baby was going to have to wear a mask, and she was having none of it. She would have none of it. So she runs to the school board, and, well, this came out of her mouth.
No mask mandates. My children will not come to school on Monday with a mask on. All right? That's not happening. And I will bring every single gun loaded and ready to, I will call every...
Okay, that's 3 minutes. You've gone past your time. It's a policy. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. I'll see y'all on Monday.
I'll see you all on Monday. Now, there's so much there to unpack. It's only a couple of seconds long. It wasn't that much. You're not going to make my baby wear a mask. I'm not going to allow it. And then into this weird tirade of, I'm going to get my gun. And they're all going to be loaded. None of these unloaded guns. We'll have none of that. And there's so much. The first part, this county already voted. They voted to say that, yes, you do whatever the hell you want with your kids. You want to send your kid to school and allow them to infect everybody else? That's your right to do because you're omnipotent. But the gun part, did nobody in the room, and there was no, everyone's like, okay, well, your time's up. Are these folks so desensitized to these threats that this is just, another white woman with a loud mouth, another white person with a gun. Yeah, no surprise there. And I guess my favorite part is the woman leading the meeting going, oh, all right, your 3 minutes are up. You got to move along. It's the policy. And this woman just turned around and go, okay. And walked away. So this is the part that just freaked me out. Okay, so the mask over the face, that tyranny. Won't have it. Won't allow my child to wear a mask. No, I'll go to the guns if I have to. But telling me to shut up and sit down and limit my free speech, well, that seems reasonable. Come on, man. I mean, if you're going to go full on crazy, at least be consistent. But I love how she just, oh, okay, turned around. You'll see me Monday. kind of a world do we live in when that can reproduce? I mean, ultimately, this is someone who is reproduced. And that means they're going to be other. And she said she had more than one, because at first she said child, then she said, no, children. She forgot she had children. Maybe she only likes one of them. I don't know. But, this person reproduced not once, but multiple times. That means there are others of her out there. That means the gene pool getting a little diluted. And this is my fear, because here's the reality. You have all these parents who probably have never found a school board meeting ever. And now here they are going, well, my baby nugget, I want to see her beautiful smile because she's drenched in the blood and whatever. You've heard the nonsense. And this is where I'm just like, man, please. And you couldn't at this point pay me enough to be on a school board, which is why I found it interesting in my little area here where I'm at in central Pennsylvania. One of the school board members in this area put out a piece basically going through this, saying, look, the sad reality is a lot of crazies now found their way to these school board meetings. He wrote in the paper, it's a requirement for local school boards to provide opportunities for public comment. He said this provision gives residents of a school district the chance to vent to their spleens about exorbitant taxes and demand subjects be taught properly the way they were during most frigid period of the Cold War. He said in the past, more often than not, nobody showed up. Not these days, he writes, as social media outlets, national news broadcasts, and our local newspapers tell us school boards are the new battleground in the fight for America's future. He says some members of my community appear to interpret this part of board meetings as the occasion to tell board members why they have the collective intelligence of a village idiot and how the school district ought to be addressing real problems. He says when the board does not fall in line with each and every demand, we are accused of ignoring the thoughtful, unbiased, sincere, and righteous ultimatums of our community. And this school board member says, and for this reason, my comments are not coming from a member of a school board, but rather a member of my community who serves on a school board. He writes, with all due respect to the men and women who snarl, I'm a taxpayer, you work for me. He says, no, I don't work for you. He says, I was elected by people who voted to represent you. It's not the same thing. You may also be surprised to learn that every member on the school board is a taxpayer too. Interesting shot. He goes on with number 2, with all due respect to the people who introduce themselves as doctors without mentioning their specialties or credentials and expect their pronouncements to be accepted as unimpeachable. He says, when I have a toothache, I go to the dentist. I don't go to an oncologist. To me, the logical person to consult about a virus is a virologist. When a person introduces him or herself as a doctor, their education, training, experience matter to me. After all, he points out, Jack Kevorkian was a doctor, and he was. And probably a pretty good one. He goes on with number 3, with all due respect to those of you who believe threatening a school board member with a lawsuit constitutes effective communications, you are not the first, you will not be the last. And I've heard that a million times. Also, with all due respect, he goes on, number 4, parents who declare, keep this mask mandate nonsense up and I'll pull my child out of school and you'll lose money and then you'll be sorry. He writes, framing your choice in that way makes you sound like a bully. Still, it's your choice. Nobody is taking away your choice from you. Number 5, with all due respect to the parents who make the pretentious statement phrased as a foregone question, don't parents always know what's best for their child? He writes, no, we don't. Nevertheless, if you are offended because I don't believe parents are infallible, you can always sue or take your child out of school. Your choice. I like that one. I like that one a lot because I think most of the time parents are horrible. And especially the ones who go to school board meetings, I'm going to bring my gun. Just a thought. And he writes, finally, with all due respect to the charlatans who claim health and safety measures are responsible for destroying the mental health of children simply to justify your own social agenda, you are the most offensive and vile of all, he writes. There are members of this community who tried to draw attention to the warning signs of increased mental distress among our children long before you ever thought of mental health as a potential cudgel. To listen to your repeated distortions of facts is nauseating. He writes, with all due respect, it is my fervent hope that these observations clarify the position of one member of a local school board in our community. There is only one more thing to share with my fellow citizens who come out and say, be a trendsetter, be a leader, be on the right side of history, and do what I tell you to do. He says, nope. I have watched live streams of board meetings numerous times and reviewed written protests repeatedly. Your voice has been heard. And as far as the right side of history is concerned, I like my odds. I like this guy. I wish he was my school board member. I wish we had a bunch of them telling people that say your piece, but sit down and relax. You want to take the job, run for school board. It's not a place to go beating people up. The other thing, and this is the part of this clip that it was most distressing. That woman walked out of that room. It surprised nobody that that's what she said. And you heard it with your own two ears. I'm going to bring my guns Monday. Fully loaded. Now, the school district has said, well, we're going to increase security. What? Why is this person not picked up and held for at least some kind of mental distress? Evaluated on some level. I mean, it's this kind of stuff. I'll guarantee you one thing. If Amelia was a black woman, I'll bet you they'd have wrestled her to the ground, tased her, and carried her away, and not only handcuffs, but shackles and the whole 9 yards. But white woman saying, I got a gun? Meh. I guess it's Friday. Love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Should I be freaked out by the fact that is allowed to happen? And nobody was surprised. Nobody in the room. Scary times to me. Some good news today, though. The U.S. Department of Labor, Marty Walsh, who I'm a big fan of, who've had him here on the program, they have moved forward on their Good Jobs initiative. Going to start taking some steps in creating and supporting good union jobs across the country. Thrilled with it. 3 parts. They're going to move forward on these parts that will provide workers with more information about their rights to unionize and to boost protections for workers on the job in federal contracts so they don't get cheated. So that they actually, earn the decent wage that we want them to earn. Problem is, we've got so many unscrupulous contractors out there who screw with them. But Secretary Walsh said the U.S. Department of Labor initiative will provide technical assistance to ensure that that they're able to follow the rules, contractors, on prevailing wage, on registered apprenticeship programs, paid leave, even pre-apprenticeship programs. And also, the laws like Davis-Bacon, like project labor agreements, all of this stuff. Being the high road employer instead of the fly-by-night transient dirtbags that have almost destroyed most of our construction industry. Sounds like a way to go. I'm thrilled with the fact that the Walsh and the Department of Labor are moving in this direction. And a good day in Ohio, the good folks in Ohio, a new chip plant may be coming, and not potato chips, but those little things that go and make your smart bomb smart and your smartphone smart, and the chips that we need for all of the things that we want. Evidently, Intel announced today, along with the president, a $20 billion chip-making super hub, 1,000 acres in the center of Ohio, down near Columbus. This will be, evidently, they're expecting it to be the largest semiconductor manufacturing plant on the planet. They say that it could hire some 3,000 workers at the new site, and those workers will make in excess of $100,000 a year. So these are good. These are freaking great jobs. Also, there'll be about 7,000 construction jobs that will be involved in building this factory. So a large influx of jobs into Ohio because of this. They plan on starting here very soon, up and running, I guess, by 2025. It is a $20 billion investment. Now, Intel has already announced a $20 billion investment in 2 new factories in Arizona. So this is making the U.S. a chip hub. And what we've learned from the pandemic, what we've learned is, well, we're too dependent on the rest of the world. And our economic security, our national security, depends on us being able to have the factors of production, chips being it right now. Since the start of last year, and again, this is the Biden administration doing this. Since the start of last year, the semiconducting industry has announced $80 billion worth of investments here in the U.S. And why is that? Not because they care about the country. No, because they're patriotic. They love the country. They want to wave the flag. No, it's because the Biden administration is going to invest $52 billion in the semiconductor research and production here at home. So they're simply going, what? They got a pot of money? Okay, let's go pledge that we'll build a plant in Arizona, a plant in Ohio, maybe a couple more coming. Who knows? While I hate the idea of giving these corporations huge amounts of money, we need the production here. More importantly, and I'm hoping what comes with this, is we mandate that they stay here. And there's some clawback provisions if they get a bunch of money. I don't know what Ohio gave, but if you read the stories coming out of Ohio, you would think it was the Republican governor and the Republican legislature and their slush fund, Jobs Ohio or whatever it is, that they were the ones who brought it there. You go, maybe they brought it to Ohio, but it's the Biden administration and the money that they're putting forth that's really getting this stuff moving in this direction. And I think it's a good thing. I think we need it desperately need it. And much more. We need more manufacturing back in our shores. If we're going to be competitive globally, if we're going to do anything to stand up to China in the near future, because look, they're getting much more muscular. They're ready to take us on already. We're going to need our own production. And this is something I've been saying for almost 17 years of doing this program. I'm a big believer in domestic production for domestic consumption. The things that we need, the things that we use, the things that we desperately need, like, our military machine, we should be producing at home. We should be making sure that right here is where it's sourced, right here is where it's produced. And if we need it, we can ramp up production in the moments where we may. This a good thing. Good on the president, good on Intel, and let's make sure we hold them accountable. I got lots to get to today, lots to talk about. Big news on the former guy Rudy Giuliani front. We'll talk a little bit about that after this. Quick break, right back. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1973. That was the day oil, chemical, and atomic workers struck Shell Oil over health and safety issues. OCAW had been involved in lobbying for the passage of OSHA and other environmentally related acts. Their members worked in some of the most dangerous, most toxic industries in the country. By 1972, they demanded contract language for health and safety committees on the job. The oil company countered with accusations that improved safety proved too expensive and that OCAW used the issue to assert union control over the production process. The other oil companies eventually settled in OCAW's favor, but Shell would not budge. And so, the OCAW called a strike at 8 facilities and a boycott of all Shell products. They also successfully enlisted the support of environmental organizations by stressing toxic chemical exposure and hazards faced by workers and the public alike. Picket lines were solid and thousands honored the boycott. Sales for Shell fell by 25%. After 4 months, the strike fund was nearly drained. Shell exploited internal divisions among members at a Texas plant and negotiated a separate settlement. What health and safety language Shell did agree to was non-binding. The union was broke, and the strike ended in compromise in early June. Despite this, as historian Robert Gordon notes, OCAW was able to gain strong health and safety language at all other oil companies for the first time, heightened public awareness of health hazards confronting millions of workers, and pressured OSHA into adopting stricter standards. Perhaps more importantly, the strike solidified the tentative Labor Environmental Alliance. Having merged with the United Steelworkers, the union continues to secure safe working conditions through contracts and alliances today.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So, looks like the House of Cards coming down. I mean, and quickly. Every day, something new. Today, the University of Toledo, this is, I guess, the big news. They have stripped Rudy Giuliani and Michael Flynn of their honorary degrees. Yes, Rudy was honorary class of 2003. They gave him a law degree. After 9/11, hey, you know, he was America's mayor. Why not? Also, Michael Flynn was honorary class of 2014 for his military service. But I love what the president said of the university. He said that Giuliani and Flynn no longer represent the highest level of our values and standards that were evident when we first bestowed the degrees. Yeah, how far they have fallen. And sadly stuff. Lots to get to on the Rudy front, though, because there is a lot. And here to share some thoughts on our America's mayor, I've asked Stuart Stevens to come talk with us. Stuart's an author. His latest, It Was All a Lie, How the Republican Party Became Trump, political consultant, 5 GOP presidential candidates, and also the principal over at the Lincoln Project. Stuart, thanks for taking time for us.
It's great to be here, man. Thanks for asking me to the party.
Let's start with the principal thing. You're the principal? Is that like the head?
No, I don't know where that came from. I wasn't part of the original group that started the Lincoln Project. I was actually working on Bill Well's campaign when he was primarying Trump. If you remember that,
Yep.
Former governor of Massachusetts. He had been one of my clients as a consultant, and I kept saying, "Why doesn't anybody primary Trump?" And then when Weld went and did it, it was like, well, damn, he called my bluff. I had to go work for him. So I joined up with the Lincoln Project. I just called him up and asked if I could help later on, like in the spring, late spring of 2020. But I've been working with it since, and it's been a great experience.
Yeah, I just thought there was something special about that. So you're basically chief cook and bottle washer. I got it. But I want to get to the Giuliani stuff. I mean, it's a little slap on the wrist, taking the degree away. That's just kind of a little knock. But we find out today that, one of his former bagmen, this Igor Fruman, a year in prison. The other guy, he's going to jail too. We're seeing all of this stuff piling up. The April FBI raids, we're now finding out a ton of communications. Every day, there's something. Do we eventually get to a point where Rudy goes to jail? Because that's what I'm waiting for.
Yeah. I lived in New York all the years that Rudy was mayor. And, I got to say, he really did a lot of great things for New York. And it's just extraordinary to see this fall. I think there was a plot to overthrow the government of the United States.
Right.
We say to end the peaceful transference of power, but it really wasn't peaceful this time because, 6 people died. These things don't happen. It wasn't a flash mob. And every element of the Republican Party was involved. From the White House to RNC, to big donors, to the Attorney General's Association, to the Senate and congressional staffers. I mean, look, you know how politicians are. They don't go out the door without it being staffed. I hope that they're going to get to this. I don't know what greater crime against the legacy of democracy you can commit than trying to end the American experiment. And history tells us if we don't hold these people accountable, it's only going to be called a practice.
No, you're absolutely right. And this is one of these things where every day something else is coming out. Every day there's more information. Every day we find out another bit. Today it's the memo that we're going to have the National Guard seize all the voting machines, and they were going to have the director of national intelligence bring an analysis in 60 days, which would have meant that he wasn't leaving on January 20th. So the plan all along was to just stall this out and keep coming up with new information and doing all this stuff. And the Republican Party would have bought it. And this is the part that I'm struggling with, because every Republican voter that I know right now, they're singing from the same hymnal. it was stolen, the big lie. All of these states did all this stuff. All these dead people were voting. They were all, busloads of people coming from out of the country to do this stuff. They've bought this stuff hook, line, and sinker, and it doesn't matter, I don't think, what comes out. So I guess as a former Republican, do you see a possibility of the Republican Party being saved by any of this information coming out? Or is it just so damning that they're so involved that they're all involved?
I'm out of hope for the Republican Party. I'm not the guy to go to have any optimism about the Republican Party. I think it's a complete collapse of a party, unlike anything we've seen in American history. The only thing I can compare it to is sort of the Communist Party, where what it said it belonged, what it believed in, and what it actually did became so disparate that it finally just collapsed. I tell you what, I was thinking about this last night for some reason. 57% of the House Republicans voted not to certify.
Right.
As far as I can tell, every one of them has benefited from that vote as far as their standing in the party. So what's to say next time it won't be 75%? I know, we talk about this a lot, but there are a lot of people that have really studied how democracies fall. And if you read these books, modern democracies usually fall at the ballot box through a process. You look at Hungary. That's why Republicans are so in love with Hungary now. That's how Viktor Orban came to power. It's less with tanks and planes like Chile falling under Allende. It's a slow process. And this is, my greatest worry here is there are these buffoonish figures out there that represent a lot of this movement. Marjorie Taylor Greene, Gopar, Matt Gaetz. But the movement itself is not buffoonish.
No.
And I think they kind of benefit from having these, ridiculous human beings out there, because then you're likely to say, well, give me a fucking break. Is Marjorie Taylor Greene going to overthrow the United States government? But they're very patient. They're well funded. They have a broad propaganda network, and they think they're going to win. And sitting here today, I'd like to tell you they're wrong, but I think it's still very much up and down.
I think it is up and down because I think the moneyed interests haven't been exposed yet. I still think that the people who funded all of this stuff have to be exposed for any of this stuff to come down. Yeah, we're going to go after the shaman guy with the weird hat. We're going to find the guy who defecated on the floor. We're going to find them. But do we find the people who wrote these memos? Do we know who is behind all this? Are we going to hold Trump accountable? Are we going to hold the people who were funding this whole thing accountable? And I don't have at this moment the confidence to say that we're going to. I hope we do. I really do, but I don't have the confidence to think we're going to.
Well, I think you're dead on here. It is a deep corruption. What strikes me that is just so unbelievable about corporate America is corporate America has a really good deal now. I mean, would you rather be a corporate CEO in the United States of America or Russia? And they fund a lot of these people who are attempting to end government, our relationship to government as we know it, in democracy. And why? Usually people do what's in their best interest, ultimately, and why they can't see that this isn't in their best interest. Some can, but there's still a lot of big corporations out there that are continuing in various ways to funnel money to these people. Some of them say, okay, I'm not going to give directly to Congressman X, but I'm going to give to the Republican National Committee, which gives money to that person.
Right.
And I think it's feeding the alligator, hoping the alligator eats you last, and that never works.
No, do you think because I keep hearing people saying, no, there are good Republicans left. There are good Republicans in the House and in the Senate, and they truly want to do the right thing. But and then there's the excuse. It's Trump. It's the voters. It's whatever. Are those people there? Is there a soul left, or is it all just black?
There's no soul left. I'm not sure there ever was a soul.
Thank you.
And when you say people sell out, it's predicated upon the notion they had something to sell. And when I worked in the party, I kind of feel, Rick, like I'm the guy who was working for Bernie Madoff and actually thought we were beating the market. It's like, what? This isn't happening. All these things that the party said it was for, these kind of core beliefs, personal responsibility, character counts, deficit matters, strong on Russia. I actually believe those things. As it turns out, I don't know what other conclusion to come to except that they were marketing slogans. When you say Chevrolet's the heartbeat of America, you don't take your car to a cardiologist. It's just a slogan.
Right.
Because I don't think people abandon deeply held beliefs in a few years. I think all it means is that you didn't deeply hold them. Unless there's some evidence. I mean, say, I don't believe in aliens, but alien lands in my front yard. Okay, I believe in aliens. But that didn't happen to the Republican Party. And I think that really what it has become is not a political party in the sense that we have known political parties. I think it exists to elect Republicans and beat Democrats. And that's really not what a party is. Parties have an ideological base. They have some sort of coherent theory of government. I mean, say what you will about Elizabeth Warren, she can articulate a theory of government and she'll argue with you all day and she'll do a hell of a job with it.
Yeah, no, see, I pine for the days when I had actual conservative friends to argue policy with and the proper role of government. And, because we're in this moment where, 2015, I guarantee you and I are on opposite ends of the table and we're probably, heated in our positions. And in this moment, and I may be wrong, but in this moment now we're looking at, the post-Trump world and possibly the pre-Trump, Trump 2 part of the world. And now we're on the same side going, how do we save just the core function of democracy, policy completely aside?
Rick, when I look back at all these ads I made and all these campaigns, like about capital gains tax or this or that, it all just seems quaint. I mean, it seems like worrying about like your cholesterol count in a knife fight. I mean, it just seems like, what? This was important? And I mean, what their party now is, Republican Party, in my view, it's really a syndicate. It's a cartel. I mean, no one asks what is the higher purpose of OPEC. It sells oil. You don't ask narco cartels, like, what do you really believe in? Like, they sell dope.
Right.
And I think that's really where the Republican Party is. It exists to beat Democrats.
So then let me ask you this then, because, I know a lot of solidly working class Republicans who, they bought the shirt, they got the hat, they're invested in it. It's my party. And yet, time and time again, the party doesn't deliver on things that would be beneficial to them other than, well, they're not the Democrats. And that seems to be the only message that's fairly consistent. And I keep wondering, how do we reach working class Republican voters who are continually voting just against Democrats without actually getting anything positive in return? Or is that not what it's really about?
Well, I think it's the question of the moment. I think you're absolutely right question. I look at the Alabama Senate race of Doug Jones versus Roy Moore, right? So it's almost like a Saturday Night Live sketch. What would it get white Republicans to vote for moderate Democrat? Okay, well, what if the Republican was a child molester?
Yeah.
And 67% of them still voted for the guy. So I
think the Trump thing, the Trump himself. You got Trump, 3 times, married, adulterer, cheater, liar, all kinds of things. And the Bible thumping, wanting the.
I know, Mike Pence. I mean, look, a lot of people were wrong about Trump in 2016, but it's really hard to find anybody who was more wrong than me. I didn't think he'd win the primary or the general because I couldn't wrap my mind around the Republican Party that I thought I knew nominating someone who talked in public about having sex with his daughter.
Yeah.
I mean, call me crazy. That just seemed like that wasn't going to happen.
But this is where you and I differ. When I went home, and I grew up in Cleveland, and I went home in April of 16. And I went home and I talked to my friends, my family, to people, just good salt of the earth working people. And all of them were registering to vote for Trump and had never voted before. They weren't politically active because he threw them, I like to say a drowning man will even grab an anchor if you throw it to him. They threw them the anchor because they lost all those jobs from the Ford plant and the Chevy plant. They lost all of the manufacturing that had been the bread and butter of the middle class American dream. And they wanted that back in the worst way. And he kind of sold that to them. So aside from the racism and the misogyny and all the nonsense, they bought into that. We might be able to get something of the American dream back. And it didn't happen, but that's what they were buying.
Yeah, but I think that race is an element here that is, it's difficult to talk about. I have this argument all the time, although they've kind of quit arguing, with my Republican friends, that they would say, look, Stuart, are you really telling me that what it was, 67 million people voted for Trump in 16 and now 70 are racist? And well, first of all, there probably are 67 million racists in the country, so let's don't be shocked.
Right.
But my answer was no, but I think that you have to have something more important that you think you're getting that justifies having a racist for president. Because, when you look at, we toss around working class and stuff, we really are talking about the white working class. The same way with evangelicals. I mean, it was black evangelicals who beat Roy Moore, particularly black evangelical women. So, those who make 50,000 and under, I mean, Hillary Clinton won them. Without a doubt, they were won by Biden. They just weren't, she didn't win 50,000 and under. Biden didn't win white voters. So I think that race is more of an element here than we often talk about.
No, I don't disagree with you on that.
And I think it doesn't mean that everybody is racist that voted for it. But, if you and I were just taking a pop quiz and you say, okay, 90% of black evangelicals support a Democrat, 90% of white evangelicals support a Republican, we probably wouldn't think that the important word there was evangelical.
You're not wrong on that, and that's a topic we can delve into another time and deeply. But Stuart, I appreciate you taking a little time bouncing these issues around with us. So just so I'm clear, no hope for the current Republican Party.
Burn it to the ground.
Burn it to the ground. Words that I hope someone will listen to. Stuart, I appreciate the time, man. Thanks so much.
All right, brother. It's great. It's great to see you. I love the show.
Good stuff. Thank you so much. Stuart Stevens, he is the chief cook and bottle washer over there at the Lincoln Project. Also check out his book, which I love the title of. It was all a lie, how the Republican Party became Trump. We'll get links out on social media. You can check that out. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. Listen to the Rick Smith Show. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 2000. Just after midnight, 600 police officers clashed with picketing longshoremen in Charleston, South Carolina. The port in Charleston ranked the 4th largest in the United States. While South Carolina is one of the states with the lowest union membership, the port is an exception. The picketers were predominantly African Americans. They were represented by the International Longshoremen's Association, Local 1422 and 1771. That January, a Danish company, Nordana, announced they would unload their ships with non-union labor. The company had used union labor for more than 2 decades. 600 police were on hand to watch over 20 scabs brought in to unload the ships. The police force included helicopters and armored personnel vehicles. The longshoremen held a meeting to discuss their response. A picket of longshoremen was set up at the port. The police violently opposed the picket. They hurled gas grenades and racial epithets. They savagely beat Ken Riley, the president of Local 1422. 5 union members were arrested and charged with felony rioting and faced 5 years in prison despite a lack of evidence. And they were placed under house arrest for more than a year. They became known as the Charleston Five. The South Carolina Attorney General vowed to make an example of these workers. He promised jail, jail, and more jail, and even going as far as comparing them to terrorists. The labor movement in South Carolina and beyond rallied to their defense. Yellow bumper stickers and billboards reading "Free the Charleston Five" could be spotted throughout the state. A plan developed to conduct actions at ports across the world to support these men and their right to picket. Faced with an outpouring of support, South Carolina reduced the charges to a misdemeanor and a $100 fine.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So burn the entire Republican Party down, says Stuart Stevens. I don't think there's anything salvageable there at all. And what comes out of that, I don't know. And this is where I keep going. Can you reach the working class voters and say, hey, we can finally maybe get some of the things that need to be done. Maybe we get rid of someone like Joe Manchin in West Virginia and somebody who's a little bit more working class minded. Maybe someone out in Arizona knows what a day's labor is like. I don't know. I'm hopeful, but I don't know. I'm here to share some thoughts on the world that we live in. His most recent piece, Biden just officially surrendered on progressives' top priorities. And look, he had my next guest, Max Byrne, has the greatest analysis of the president, I think. He wrote that Biden's critical weakness rests, as always, in believing there is an untapped reservoir of goodness and civic-mindedness in the Trumpified Republican Party. I would just take the Trumpified part out and say the entire Republican Party. But I think he's spot on right. That's why I've asked our good friend Max Byrne to come talk with us. Max is a political columnist over at the Daily Beast, also a Democratic strategist. Max, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks for having me.
So I think your assessment is perfectly accurate. I think Biden still thinks he's one of the good old guys in the Senate. I think he thinks that these are the same people that he served with, 10 years ago? I think he still believes that these are the same people who care about the same country that he cares about, and I think he's dead wrong.
Yeah, it's absolutely right. I mean, right over my shoulder is a picture of then Vice President Joe Biden from Obama's second inaugural. You're telling me this guy didn't know Republicans hated Democrats? He lived through 8 years of this with Barack Obama. And to say that he thought Republicans would come around in a spirit of civic mindedness, it beggars belief.
But here's the thing, and this is where I'm going to push back a little bit, because let's say he thought that Republicans were going to be okay. You still got to think that it's the Democrats who are going to help you out. I don't think if you would have said, back a year ago today, that it would be Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema who were going to stop his entire agenda, stab him in the heart, and doom the Democrats to massive losses in the midterms. At least that's the way it's looking right now. I don't think many people would have jumped on and agreed with you. Do you?
Well, I think Manchin has always been pretty clear about what he thought, at least as far back as 2020. Prior to that, he actually wanted to amend the filibuster. So, the money was just too good in obstruction, I guess. Kyrsten Sinema has been a complete personality change to the point where all of her supporters, liberal groups, donors are completely abandoning her. And I don't know how we could have planned for the Sinema effect.
Yeah, well, she's going to run for president, Max. I mean, that's from, and I don't know if that's actually true. I don't know if that's been, I don't know. That seems a little bit far-fetched. I'm going to burn down all of my support. NARAL's going to pull their support from me, and I'm then going to run for president. I don't know that the calculus is all that correct on that process.
Yeah, she's clearly listening to Tulsi Gabbard's political advisors who said, you're going to be a shoo-in. People love people who hate voters. That's a winning ticket. And she's in trouble. I mean, she's clearly not going to run again because she's completely underwater with Democrats. And even worse, Republicans in Arizona still don't like her. There is no level of appeasement you're going to be able to give Republicans to make them like a Democrat. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah. Let's talk about the surrendering on progressive priorities. I don't think the president surrendered. I don't think he had a choice. Do you see a path differently? Do you see a way that this could have been done differently, that he didn't have to do what he's done, or do you think there's something else?
I think had we kept Build Back Better and the bipartisan infrastructure bill together for another month or month and a half, you likely would have had some leverage with Joe Manchin to get a modified child tax credit. And that's really the important part of this. That child tax credit is one of the most effective pieces of anti-poverty legislation in history. Yep. And because we split these up, because we let Manchin essentially run the show, we have now sacrificed 4 million children back into poverty if we don't get this passed immediately.
Now, here's my thought, and this is where we disagree a little bit. I don't think Manchin moves at all. I think he likes the fact that he's the fly in the ointment, and I would have thought that nothing would have gotten done. And I said this from the beginning, and this isn't new. I said months before this was all done. I said eventually my fear is nothing gets done. Because the progressives aren't going to give on theirs, the moderates aren't going to give on theirs, and I thought that the SALT tax thing was going to jump in there as well. So there's all of this stuff going on that eventually they just eat their own, because this is what Democrats do. They convene the circular firing squad and they shoot each other in the foot.
Well, with Joe Manchin, it can sort of be like looking for cracks in the ice, and I rarely have disagreed with you, but I will say when progressives stood their ground on the bipartisan infrastructure bill and threatened to tank it, they got Joe Manchin to name a number for Build Back Better. They got Joe Manchin to enter into the discussion. So we see when we put a lot of pressure and a lot of heat on Joe Manchin that he will come to the table and start talking. Now we're just so afraid to put heat on him that he's not going to come to the table in any circumstance.
I disagree. I don't disagree. He put a number on it. They even put a time frame on it, and that was when was that? That was a while ago.
That was a different world.
It was a different world. So going forward, because look, a lot of this stuff is really popular, Max, as you know, especially that child tax credit, which cut child poverty in half. And it wasn't what allegedly Joe Manchin thinks, that people were just going to spend it on drugs or whatever. People used it on food. They used it on shelter. They used it on clothing. They used it on necessities. And what's amazing to me is such a small amount of money made such an enormous impact. It seems like that should be something that is bipartisan. So even if that went all by itself, you could maybe get that done with 10 Republicans. Is there a possibility, do you see, of 10 Republicans coming along on that?
I don't believe there is a possibility of getting 10 Republicans on literally anything except maybe a debt ceiling increase. I mean, Republicans have been very clear where they stand. They will not participate in this government. They will not give Democrats any win, even if it helps children in their own state. And they show no real concern about this because in most cases, they've messed with the vote and messed with districts in a way that they don't have to worry about popular anger. They've picked their voters.
I mean, it's not even about popular anger. It's just about being decent. This used to be the party of family values, the party of we care about the children. I mean, this is the baseline bottom. This is morality. This isn't even about policy or party or anything. This is about morals. This is about being a decent human being.
Well, that boat has long since sailed with the Republican Party. I mean, these are people who just today were threatening to shoot teachers in Virginia if they instituted COVID mandates. These are people who had no compulsion denying their own constituents universal pre-K, child tax credits, any number of things. This is a party that lives in fear of what one man, Donald Trump, has to say and the vengeance he will wreak on them. And that's as far as their logic goes.
Crazy stuff. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're at Max Burns. Max is a Democratic strategist, also a columnist over at the Daily Beast. We'll get links out to his most recent article, Biden Just Officially Surrendered, on progressives' top priorities. written over at the Daily Beast. We'll get links out so you can take a look at that. But here, going forward, I think the president did a good job today. I think, the Intel plant going to Ohio, $20 billion of investment, a good thing. Now, Intel isn't doing it out of the goodness of their heart. There's a stack of federal money that I'm sure they're planning to get their hands on. But this is happening because of Joe Biden, because of this push to reshore manufacturing and bring jobs back and recreate our economy in a way that values middle class, working class jobs. Is this the way forward from this point? If the voting rights thing doesn't seem to be going, if we don't seem to be getting anything on the Build Back Better, is this the direction we should be spending more time to try and compete in the next election?
Yeah, it is. I think these kitchen table issues matter, especially now. We've let Republicans control the narrative, even in the minority, to the point where a lot of voters think that this inflation that's happening now will be here forever. But the higher wages they've gotten from the better jobs that have come up in this economy under Joe Biden will go away, when it's the exact opposite that's true. And the fact that Democrats have essentially tried to talk about everything on the campaign trail means that nothing really stands out. And it's time to really pick our issues and drill those home.
No, you're absolutely right. In fact, I was just reading a piece today that was talking about how, Joe Biden's not FDR, because FDR understood you hammer on that crisis, you stay on it, and you make people's lives better on that. You do all your other stuff, but you stay on message. And I think this administration hasn't done enough of that, of touting the victories and having everybody marching in the same order, much like the Republicans really do a masterful job of.
Yeah, and I think that's emblematic in Joe Biden's marathon press conference this week, that he opened by quoting his family and saying, when you talk about everything, you're really talking about nothing. And then he proceeded to talk about everything for 2 hours, to the point where I, who watched it very closely, can barely remember a thing that he said. What we need is not to have Joe Biden doing that. We need Joe Biden in places like West Virginia, pushing and putting heat on these people to hold their senator accountable, to hold their Republican Congress people accountable, because the more people learn about what Republicans are keeping from them, the less they like Republicans. It's shocking, I know.
Yeah, because look, a lot of the stuff in the Build Back Better plan, very popular. The voting rights stuff, very popular. Sad reality, this is where the Senate was where things go to die. And because of the filibuster and Manchin and Sinema stopping this, we're not getting any of that. And it looks like, and you're the Democratic strategist, you're the ones looking at the tea leaves. It doesn't look great for the Democrats holding on to the House and Senate. And I'm of the mindset that, fine, if you're going to lose it, right now's the time to lose it. At least you've got the veto pen to stop any horrible things from happening. And we're going to have a couple of years of nothing getting done. We'll be 2 years further behind on climate change, 2 years farther behind on China. And as a country, we will be continually falling behind because of our dysfunction. And maybe out of that comes some bit of sanity. I don't know. I'm curious your thought.
Yeah, I think Democrats are preparing to pay for the cost of inaction. I mean, you can't not deliver on ambitious promises that you've made. You can't say, well, it was just too hard. You need to find ways to set the agenda, to take back control of what people are perceiving about the administration. I mean, Joe Biden could do a number of really bold things that don't require Congress. They would capture headlines for weeks. They would cause Republicans to respond to his administration. When you're in a defensive crouch your entire first year, that doesn't inspire confidence from voters. I mean, for as terrible as Donald Trump was, he didn't play defensive. He kept Democrats responding to him the entire time. And in a lot of ways, that's why the losses Republicans suffered weren't as bad in 2020 as they could have been.
No, you're absolutely spot on right there. And this is where they've got to do a lot more social media stuff. They got to get him out being Joe Biden. Don't do press conferences. Get out among the people and highlight issues and move in that direction. And then I think maybe you got a shot. But you got to make things better. You got to have something that's going to come back and say, this is what we've done. And this infrastructure bill, again, we talked a little bit about the Intel, but this infrastructure bill has a chance of doing some of that, especially as more jobs are created. And I know that my Republican friends love to say Joe Biden doesn't know how to create jobs, even though technically during his presidency, most ever which seems kind of weird with messaging.
Yeah, I mean, this is just a question of breaking down things that are not immediately clear to voters, right? Like you can talk about building a bridge and repairing a road, but what people want to hear is how that's going to affect their ability to feed their kids, what that's going to mean for someone who doesn't have health care right now, who can go get a job created by this infrastructure bill and have health insurance, be able to get medication, be able to go to the dentist. That's what matters to people, how these things affect their day-to-day life. And we have been very ambiguous and very high level in talking about how much money we're spending, but not how those dollars are going into families' pockets.
No, we've got a lot of work to do. Before I let you go, I wanted to get your thoughts on the news today that there's a draft, a draft of Trump deciding that we're going to have the military grab up all the voting machines. We're going to have the director of national intelligence do an analysis over 60 days. Seemed to me like another piece in the planning of a coup attempt. I'm curious your thoughts of the information coming out today.
This memo is ballistic. I mean, I get heat sometimes for saying this, but there is far more direct documentary evidence here for an insurrection and sedition case against Donald Trump than Democrats ever had on the Russia Mueller investigation. I mean, they wrote this down, and Republicans are saying, well, he didn't do it, so it doesn't matter, which is the equivalent of saying, well, the suicide bomber's bomb didn't go off, so did he really commit a crime? In any other context, it is clear what the president tried to do and what he would have done had circumstances gone slightly differently.
Yeah, now this memo, do we know who wrote it? I know there was some talk of maybe it was Sidney Powell who wrote it. Do we know who actually wrote the memo?
I have seen a few things floated. I'm not certain myself. It is interesting that he, in this memo, promotes a special counsel that they call her, which could be Jenna Ellis, Sidney Powell, any number of cranks who would have been lording over the death of democracy. I mean, it is a nightmare to think about what might have happened, given how bad what actually happened was.
Yeah.
The fact that it could have gotten worse.
You're spot on. But for a handful of Republican state secretaries of state, this could have gone completely the other way. And look, I know my last guest said, burn the whole party down. There's still a couple, I guess. And to me, there's a couple that just said, I don't want to do the ultimate crime. They were okay with a little bit of criming, but the kind of criming that gets you in the history books forever, they kind of balked at.
Well, they're certainly making sure they get in the history book for trying to clean up this mess. They may not have participated, but they're certainly trying to whitewash what happened. And
there you go.
It's disgraceful.
I'm right there with you, Max. I appreciate the time as always. Great stuff. Hope people will take a look at your most recent piece. Biden just officially surrendered on progressive's top priorities, written over at the Daily Beast. As always, great stuff, my friend.
Thank you.
Good stuff. Make sure you check out Max's work over at the Daily Beast. And if you missed any of today's program, grab the podcast at thericksmithshow.com. Share it with your friends. We'll take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1946. U.S. steelworkers staged the greatest walkout in the history of the steel industry. Nearly 750,000 strikers shut down more than 1,200 steel plants in 30 states. In Pennsylvania, the Pittsburgh area alone saw nearly 250,000 steelworkers take to the picket line on strike. During World War II, workers in the steel industry had mostly gone without pay increases, as the focus of steel production was to support the war effort. During the war, labor disagreements built up. When the war ended, those disagreements resulted in a wave of strikes. Workers in the steel industry believed they were long overdue a pay increase. The steel companies did not agree and refused to bargain. One such example was at Inland Steel, headquartered in Chicago, Illinois. Inland workers had not received a raise in more than 4 years. After 4 years of frozen wages, they demanded a quarter an hour increase, but their demands fell on deaf ears. Similar stories were heard at steel plants throughout the nation. The great 1946 steel strikes forced the bosses back to to the bargaining table and became part of the largest wave of strikes in United States history. All told, nearly 5,000 strikes took place that year, with some 4.6 million workers walking off the job. There was a backlash, however, against these strikes. In 1947, Congress considered 250 different labor-related bills. That year, 24 Democrats and nearly every Republican voted to override President Harry Truman's veto of the Taft-Hartley Act, which was specifically meant to curb union power. Taft-Hartley outlawed wildcat strikes. It also allowed states to pass right-to-work laws. 24 states now have right-to-work laws that severely curtail union organizing and the power of working people. At the time, President Truman denounced Taft-Hartley as a slave labor bill. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com. Like us on Facebook and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So, quick shout out to our friends out in Denver. Congratulations to the King Soopers workers, the members of UFCW Local 7, who, after their appearance with their president here on the program yesterday, they came up with a tentative agreement with Kroger. The strike there is officially over. They will be returning back to work. From what I'm hearing, pretty good deal, and good for them. And we'll see. No details have been put out yet, but the 10-day strike is over. The people will be returning to work. They'll vote here, I guess, later in the month on the agreement and make sure that it's what they want. But from what I'm hearing, not bad. It's good, and that is a good thing. I'll love to hear your thoughts. You can give us a call, 1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. If you got a thought, question, comment, something on your mind, you can jump right into that. Also, shout out to the Cemex workers out in Southern California, Teamsters Local 986. They had a practice strike today, and I love those. I always love those because you get the sense of striking without being financially going broke. But they've gone out there and said, look, this is what it's going to look like. We demand a contract. We demand this now. It comes after a federal judge found that the company Cemex, CEMEX, committed 23 violations of the workers' rights under Section 7 of the NLRA. Now, for me, this is where you go, 23 violations. Isn't this where we just impose a contract? At some point, doesn't that have to happen? And this is where, when the last major push towards major labor law reform was, 2008 when Obama was running for president. And I'll say it again. Go ahead, roll your eyes. I was going to have my wife roll her eyes because every time I say this, she does that. I met with Obama twice. I shook his hand twice, and both times told me we're going to get something better than the Employee Free Choice Act. Sadly, got nothing. But in that was a first contract arbitration. There was a clause, for those who don't remember AFCA, the Employee Free Choice Act, it was to make union elections easier. So you didn't have these long, drawn-out, abusive campaigns like we saw at Amazon, where they break every rule in the book, and then when they're guilty and they're about to be punished, the dreaded punishment is posting a notice and saying not to do it again until they do it again. The other part of it was penalties for firing people and for breaking the law. In fact, if I remember right, it was 3 times the costs of the lost wages. So today, if you get fired in a union organizing campaign, a company pays whatever your lost wages would be minus whatever you earned while you were gone. So let's say you were making $20 an hour when you got fired, and you went over, you got a job making $21 an hour. They don't owe you anything. Got a job making $19 an hour, they owe you $1 an hour for the hours you missed, which really isn't a disincentive. What the Employee Free Choice Act said is they're going to triple that. So if you went and got a job making $20 an hour and you were you lost $20 an hour, it was going to cost them $60 an hour. That a little bit of a penalty, that a little bit of a jolt, saying, hey, maybe we shouldn't do this on a mass scale. And the other part of it, and for me the biggest part, was the first contract arbitration. What a lot of people know is you go through these campaigns, you organize, you win the election, and then now the hard work of getting that first contract hammered out, that could be for forever. And in some places, I've actually been on campaigns where the owner has come out and said, look, I'll close the doors. You'll get nothing from me. I don't care what you want. You'll get nothing. And that's a violation, but who's going to hold them accountable? What this said is, if you don't come up with a first contract within the first X amount of days, one will be imposed by a mediator. Now, what I like about that, and I do like that, is it motivates both sides to sit down and really hammer out an agreement, because neither side wants anything to be imposed on them. So this is that incentive where you go, we should probably sit down and in a timely fashion get this done. Because look, nobody wants to go to work in hostile work environments. Nobody wants to go to work and have the kind of chaos that employers like to put on people during these campaigns. Because understand, workers just want their rights. And in this country right now, like it or not, employer class, workers have the right to collectively bargain. They have the right to join and form unions. They have the right to protect themselves. That is the law, until Republicans finally get the ability to do away with it completely. But that is the law, and it's what I want to see moving forward. It shouldn't take years to go through this. And we see these case after case. Elections shouldn't take months. The Amazon thing should not take months. Should not under any circumstances. But it is that simple. Also, some good news according to the Washington Post. Activision Blizzard employees at Raven Software, they've asked their company to voluntarily recognize the majority of signatures, people who want to have a union election, under the name of the Game Workers Alliance. These are the folks who do the Call of Duty Warzone. So things are filtering down to where people making video games are going, you know what? We're being taken advantage of. We should have some say. We should have some ability at better wages, hours, conditions. I think we're in a good moment. We're in a good moment where the wealth of this country can finally, maybe possibly, be somewhat reasonably divided. We've been talking about that Oxfam report that found, globally, our billionaire class has never been better. They're fat and happy. They're doing fabulous. And another 160 million people have fallen into poverty. And that right here in this country too, is even as things are going up wage-wise and the economy's doing better. We took away $250 away from kids who, for a couple of months, didn't go to bed hungry. And I think the cruel part of that, and this is the other side of that, the real cruel part of that is that for those couple of months, those kids got used to not going to bed hungry. I mean, you stop and think about that for a minute. I go back when I was a kid. I never knew that we were poor as a kid. I thought everybody lived the way we did. I thought every month, at the end of the month, there was nothing in the house, because all the kids in our neighborhood were the same thing. All of us were in the same boat. Most of the people in our community were on welfare because we weren't on the bus line. There were no jobs in the neighborhood. So getting jobs and having the ability to earn income was very difficult. And at the end of the month, things weren't there for anyone. In fact, our house was robbed a lot of times, and we didn't have anything. What they stole was food. And I think, my mind goes to this place. I can't imagine what, for months then going, what? There's something more at the end of the month. There's an abundance at the end of the month. There's an avenue to make life really better. Because I go back and I think about it, what would have an extra $60 a month meant to my mother back then, which would have been about $250 in today's dollars? What would that have meant? And it certainly would have meant food at the end of the month. It would have meant a bit of stress off of her, because I still remember looking at her, in those moments where stress was just taking over. And one of the reasons that I didn't have children until much later is because I never wanted that feeling that she had, to be able to look into a child's eyes and know that that child's hungry and there's nothing you can do about it. How incredibly painful that must feel. And now to have gone for a very short period of time, we're going to help. We're going to move a little bit of resource in the direction of children to make sure that they get something. They get a little bit more. Because understand, and I know a lot of my conservative friends are, well, welfare is they give them way too much. No, they don't. Living on welfare in the projects is not a glamorous. I think Chris Rock does the best bit on this. It's not a glorious lifestyle. You're barely existing, and in this moment, you're going, here's a little bit of resource to help manage, to help get a little bit more ahead, and then they strip it away. Just goes. Have Christmas. Christmas happens, and then I guess your Christmas present is sorry, you're going back to the way it used to be. I think that's cruel. I really do. I think it is just downright cruel. And I think we can do better. And this is where, in this moment, I'm hoping that there are Republicans that still think that there's a way to go forward on this. Mitt Romney evidently has a bill that would, maybe move us in a direction of something positive. But are you going to get 10 Republicans to come along? I don't know. And I doubt it. It's just, well, we're in one of those times where there's so many things that can and should and need to be done that, well, sadly, not happening. Let's go to the phone lines. Got Alice on line 1. Alice, how are we doing tonight?
Dazed and confused as usual. How about yourself?
It's Friday. That is a good thing.
That's all you can do. I wanted to go back to the last caller, and the last person. I told you I was dazed. Where he said to burn down the Republican Party, and I really thought, they really need to go extinct. They're doing nothing except tearing things down.
Yeah, but doing nothing in the status quo benefit them because they've already got what they want. It benefits the wealth class of this country because the tax code is written in their favor. They've deregulated sufficiently that they're happy. For them, status quo and doing nothing is a victory.
Well, true, but have you also noticed, for people that claim they're all about the corporations, it only goes to a point, because then when the corporations disagree with some of their ideas, I guess I want to say, then all of a sudden they don't like that either. Like some of the companies wanting to issue the vaccine mandates. And then all of a sudden the Republicans are like, no, you can't do that. I'm like, oh, God, you people need to make up your minds.
Yeah, but ultimately, don't you think that it comes down to the fact that all of that is just a show? When it really matters, the moneyed interests know where their bread's buttered, and they're not going to stop funding the Republican Party, because we're seeing it. After January 6th, a bunch of these companies said, no, we're not going to fund them, and yet we find out they're still backdoor funding them. As said before, you may not give money to this guy, but you'll give it to the RNC, who then gives it to him. So in effect, you gave it to him.
Right. It's a weird relationship between the corporations and the Republican Party.
Yeah,
it's sickening is what it is.
It's all political theater meant to divide us and conquer us. And look, they're winning. This is where we have to unite and come together on the idea that we're not getting what we want. We're not getting what we need. And I look at this child tax credit thing as the ultimate slap in the face. To me, it's just how do you literally take food out of the mouths of children and be okay with that?
Oh, absolutely. Considering they all claim to be such great Christians, let's follow the teachings of Jesus as long as they go along with their beliefs, I guess. That's another weird thing.
Yep.
All right. Well, you have a good evening.
I appreciate the call, Alice. Thank you, as always. Great stuff. No, I mean, that's where I'm at. I don't know where you go from the position of, we're literally going to take food out of the mouths of children. I don't know. Here's some interesting news. Kyle Rittenhouse, evidently Kyle's been named in a civil lawsuit. Knew this was coming. The parents of Anthony Huber, the Wisconsin man that Rittenhouse shot and killed. The lawsuit, I guess back in December, attorneys for the parents filed a $10 million claim notice. Now they're moving forward with the civil suit and naming Rittenhouse as the defendant. And I got to assume the other ones are going to as well. Joseph Rosenbaum's family and possibly this Gage Groskowitz. I got to imagine at some point that's going to happen. And this is going to be years in the making. And I guess I'm not surprised. It's going to happen, and Rittenhouse is going to file suit against CNN. There's going to be a lot of this, so we're not going to get away from it. But for me, at the end of the day, it still comes down to the reality. This was a horrible situation where someone put a gun in the hand of a child, and as a society, we said go. Finally, this segment, I wanted to look at Joe Biden. The administration is raising the federal minimum wage on, don't get excited, only on federal contracts and federal employees. They're going to raise that up to $15 an hour. Anyone doing work for the federal government, and it's going to impact some 70,000 federal employees, which I got to be honest, I'm kind of shocked that it's that low, but I guess they've got that many working at the Department of Agriculture, the Department of Defense, and the Department of Veterans Affairs. That is going to be implemented no later than January 30th, so a number of people will see raises there. They say that the largest share of employees, more than 56,000, currently paid less than $15 an hour, work for the Department of Defense. That actually shocks me. Also, we find out that the Biden administration is looking at raising the overtime threshold. You may remember during the Obama years, they wanted to raise it up to $47,000 a year before you could exempt anyone from the minimum wage. Trump came in, took it down to what was $35,000. Now Biden wants to raise that back up. And look, I'm all in favor of the 47 number. It should be a high threshold before you start exempting people from overtime. And look, you don't have to pay them that. You just don't give them the title of management. Pay them by the hour. Pay them overtime when they work more than 40 hours a week. Pretty simple stuff. So over the next coming days and weeks, as they roll this out, I'm sure it is something we will certainly be talking about. Going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk a little bit about what the billionaires are doing with their money. You're going to want to stick around for that. Right back after this. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1973. That was the day oil, chemical, and atomic workers struck Shell Oil over health and safety issues. OCAW had been involved in lobbying for the passage of OSHA and other environmentally related acts. Their members worked in some of the most dangerous, most toxic industries in the country. By 1972, they demanded contract language for health and safety committees on the job. The oil company countered with accusations accusations that improved safety proved too expensive and that OCAW used the issue to assert union control over the production process. The other oil companies eventually settled in OCAW's favor, but Shell would not budge. And so, the OCAW called a strike at 8 facilities and a boycott of all Shell products. They also successfully enlisted the support of environmental organizations by stressing toxic chemical exposure and hazards faced by workers and the public alike. Picket lines were solid and thousands honored the boycott. Sales for Shell fell by 25%. After 4 months, the strike fund was nearly drained. Shell exploited internal divisions among members at a Texas plant and negotiated a separate settlement. What health and safety language Shell did agree to was non-binding. The union was broke, and the strike ended in compromise in early June. Despite this, as historian Robert Gordon notes, OCAW was able to gain strong health and safety language at all other oil companies for the first time, heightened public awareness of health hazards confronting millions of workers, and pressured OSHA into adopting stricter standards. Perhaps more importantly, the strike solidified the tentative Labor Environmental Alliance. Having merged with the United Steelworkers, the union continues to secure safe working conditions through contracts and alliances today.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
We've been talking a lot about how economic inequality kills. With the latest Oxfam reports out. And as I've been saying, there's nothing new in that report. It's the same report it was the year before and the year before and the year before. Only this year, a little bit worse than in the past. Well, a lot worse than in the past, but still same direction. Rich are getting richer, poor are getting poorer. Simple. And on the economic front, we find that poor people lead shorter lives, brutish and short. But also politically, the richer our wealth class gets, well, democracy for the rest of us, not so much. And we're told if we give rich people all the money, we give them everything. They're smart. They know what to do with it. And they are. And they are doing something with it. They're moving factories overseas. And they've got the best democracy money can buy. Citizens United forward. We're in a really weird moment. The good folks over at Americans for Tax Fairness have a new graph out, a new analysis out that I wanted to talk about, which is why I've asked Will Rice to come talk with us. Will is a policy consultant with the folks at Americans for Tax Fairness. You can check out their website, americansfortaxfairness.org. We'll get links out on social media on how you can do that. Will, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks a lot for having me.
So I wake up today, I see the tweet. You guys put out a tweet on social media, new analysis. Our 661 billionaires spent $1.2 billion with a B dollars on the 2020 elections. That is an enormous amount of money that I guess basically we gave them through massive tax cuts to be able to buy our political system with.
Yeah, I mean, it's just to put that figure in perspective, it's about $1 out of every $10 that was contributed to all of the political activity in 2020. And that's from a group that represents 0.01% of all donors giving more than $200. It's an amazing amount of political clout in a very few set of hands.
And it makes us wonder. I mean, this is the part that gets me, Will. It makes you wonder why nothing we the people want actually gets done. I mean, you can tick down a number of items that are overwhelmingly popular with working class people that are never going to get considered. I mean, the $250 a month per child that cut child poverty in half, overwhelmingly popular in a bipartisan way. We ain't got it, and we probably ain't going to get it.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, there are a couple of senators in the Senate right now who are blocking President Biden's Build Back Better agenda. And it's hard not to trace some of that opposition to the amount of money that goes into campaigns from the very wealthiest Americans.
So one out of every, let me get this right. I want to make sure I get this right. Billionaires gave $1 out of every $10 in political contributions during the cycle. 661 people. They gave one out of every $10 to the campaigns.
That's right. And it's actually even smaller than that, because even within the billionaire class, there's a hierarchy. And a lot of the money, 40% of the money, came from just 4 sources. At least since 1990. Our report looked at 2 things, both what happened in 1990 and what happened in the most recent election. So what I should say is 40% of the spending came in 2020 since 1990. So it's been accelerating this billionaire infusion of cash into the political system. But it's also been concentrated among just a few figures like the Adelsons out in Nevada, and Mike Bloomberg, the former mayor of New York, founder of his own company. He has been the second biggest contributor to these causes. So even as in this case, Bloomberg often is for what would be considered progressive causes, it still is, I think, concerning that a single individual or a couple can have that much influence over what is talked about even in politics. You know,
right.
What's considered acceptable dialogue. They can set the agenda through the use of their money.
Now, I've had friends who have been in Congress. I know a number of people who are in Congress now. They've all told me the same thing. No one's ever bought their vote. You know, there's never been that quid pro quo. I'm going to give you money and I'm going to vote for something. That never happens. But what they all admit is that, you know, for a campaign contribution, you got my ear for 15 minutes. And you got your chance to make your case on, maybe I'm going to come along. Maybe I won't. Maybe I will. But you got my ear for that bit of time where the average American doesn't get that opportunity.
Exactly. You're buying access. And I agree with you. There's, quid pro quo money for votes it's illegal, first of all, and it generally doesn't happen. But if you're trying to decide who to use some of your limited time as a representative on, you're always going to say, well, the guy, you know, or the woman who gave me blank amount of money or can conglomerate a huge amount of money, that's who I'm going to spend my time on. It's just human nature. So this political influence is just one more reason why we need to get a better handle on billionaires in our country, because they are really living in a different world than the rest of us, and they're having a huge impact on our world.
Yeah, but to me, this is another reason to fear extreme wealth. When you have people who literally have, you know, the kind of wealth of small countries, that isn't good for democracy. This kind of outweighted power by a handful, not really all that good for those of us who work for a living and need our government to be fair, to do things that need to get done, pave roads and bridges and education and healthcare and all of those things. It doesn't seem like the deck is stacked, but I know we're told that they're smart, they know what to do, they're going to be benevolent, and yet I haven't seen the benevolence.
Well, certainly people like Bill Gates are giving a lot of money to charity, but I think it's important to make a distinction between charity and tax revenue. If we raise the money through taxes, then all of us are deciding how that money should be spent. It's being decided in a democratic way. If we rely entirely on private charity or heavily on private charity, that all depends on what Bill Gates wakes up and decides he wants to spend his money on. Now, he often spends it on good things, but he might change his mind tomorrow, and there's no one to naysay him. So that's why we billionaires do live in a different world than the rest of us do. They don't have the concerns. They can't even conceptualize many of the things that most people worry about. Because of the way our tax code is rigged, they can go a lifetime without paying any tax at all on the huge gains they make in their wealth.
Yeah. It's crazy. Now, you guys put out also a neat little graph I thought was really eye-popping, and it caught my attention. It goes through, you know, total billionaire contributions by elections. And you go back to 1990 in millions of dollars, there's nothing. 90, 92, 94, 96, 98, nothing. You get to 2000, a little bit, 2002, 4, 6, a little bit. Then you get to 2008, goes up to $16 million in spending by our billionaires. 2010, when Citizens United comes around, you're up to $31 billion. And then bang, it skyrockets. 231 million, 231 million in 14, 682 million in 16, 611 in 18, and then, well, through the freaking roof after that, almost 4 times the amount from 2018 to 2020. Has it always been this kind of crazy?
No, there's two things that are going on at the same time. We keyed our report to the anniversary of the Citizens United Supreme Court decision from 12 years ago. And for those of you who don't remember or didn't know, that's when the Supreme Court really loosened the rules on campaign financing. And one of the things that the Citizens United decision allowed to happen was the creation of what are called super PACs, a PAC being a political action committee. Now, there have been political action committees for a long time, but they've been under rules in terms of how much people can contribute to them, just like there are rules about how much you can contribute to an individual candidate. A super PAC does not have any of those limits. You can give as much money as you want to a super PAC. The only a restriction on them is they're not supposed to be coordinating their activities with the candidates or causes that they're supporting.
Right.
Now, that could be a very tricky thing, and it's possible to signal people without specifically coordinating with them. So it's questionable how much of a restriction that is on what these groups can do. But on the supply side of money for these groups, it's unlimited, and that's where billionaires spend a lot of their money and other very, very wealthy Americans. So that's one thing that's been going on that makes a difference in how much money is being put into campaigns by billionaires. The other thing is that billionaires, there's more of them, and they have a lot more money. The pandemic, while a misery for most of us, has been an incredible boom time for America's billionaires. The top 10 wealthiest billionaires during the pandemic have gotten collectively, on average, $1 billion richer every single day.
And a lot of that money going into politics. And I'm looking at this in the last cycle because Citizens United said that money was speech. Right? Isn't that basically what it was? That the billionaires have all this money. It used to be we out-procreated them, so we had more speech. There were more of us. They decided they were just going to buy a bunch of things. So you're looking at $2.6 billion that the billionaire class spent in the last election. Compared to the rest of us, that seems like an awful lot of speech that they were able to purchase. That the rest of us, well, it's not surprising we don't get what we need.
Exactly. That 2.6 trillion, that includes what we had, because we had 2 billionaires running for president last time, as you may recall, Mike Bloomberg and Steyer. And so the 2.6 trillion is if you include what they spent on themselves, which even before Citizens United, you were allowed to spend whatever you wanted on your own campaign. So we make a distinction. That is true. If you include that as 2.6 trillion, even if you take out all
2.6 billion, right? Not trillion.
Yeah, I'm sorry, 2.6 billion. Even if you take all that out, it's still 1.2 billion that was spent on campaigns and political action committees other than those 2 individual presidential campaigns.
Right.
So either way you look at it, it's a huge increase in 2020. And there's no reason to think that it won't be even bigger next time.
You listen to the Rick Smith Show. We're here with Will Rice. Will is a policy consultant with the folks over at Americans for Tax Fairness. AmericansForTaxFairness.org, the website, if you want to take a look at their analysis and the work that they do. Now, you look at this, $2.6 billion is a lot of money. Even without the Bloomberg and the Steyer campaigns, $1.2 billion is a lot of money to put into campaigns. But in the big picture, in the real big sense of it, this seems like, buying the democracy of the superpower of the world. This seems kind of cheap.
It is, especially for billionaires. It's less than 0.1% of their total wealth, and it's less than a day's worth of their pandemic wealth growth of all the billionaires, of the 600, 700 billionaires. So it's very important when you hear these big numbers to try to put them in context, what it would mean for a regular family. So spending, if you're a billionaire and you throw in $10 million in a campaign, you're not really risking much about how you're going to live your life or anything else. It's a very good investment because, as we said, you're basically buying access to people who can hold your taxes down, who can deregulate industries you're invested in, and help you make a whole bunch more money.
I mean, it's amazing. Now, I'm looking at the list of names. You have the top 20 billionaire political contributors from 1990 to 2020. And I'm going through the names, and Adelson and Bloomberg and Steyer and Griffith and Simmons and Moskowitz and Singer and Soros and down the list. I don't see the Koch brothers. Why are the Kochs not on this list? Is it that they're not stupid enough to hand money off to politicians, and they spend all of their time, energy, and money building AstroTurf groups to push policy in different ways because they know that politicians are just tools? Or did we miss something?
I think the Kochs do spend more of their money and have spent more of their money traditionally building up groups, as you say, AstroTurf groups, think tanks, advocacy groups that have pleasant-sounding names that actually are pursuing policies that are not good for working people. So I think that's where they shift most of their money. They certainly are among the billionaire class, but I think they're just taking a different strategy for how they want to influence national policy.
Yeah, and this is one of those things, again, I keep coming back to when the money, my grandfather always said, when a rich guy pulls a dollar out of his pocket to tell you you don't need something, you better spend two to get it. So anywhere where these people are spending money, I better be spending money on the other side because they understand return on investment. And you look at where we are today. Every policy that is thought of with them in mind first. Anytime we talk about how we're going to help the poor or help the working class or get education for our kids or health care, the first question we're asking is, can we afford that? Where are we going to have the money? But boy, when we wanted tax cuts to make sure our billionaires were, even wealthier, I didn't hear that from any Republican of how it was going to be paid. We came up with some mythical, it'll pay for itself. Their benevolence, it'll fall out of their pockets and we can sweep it up from behind.
Mm-hmm. No, trickle down doesn't work. And I think that the American people are finally, after 40 years of that being the ascendant economic and political theory in this country, are believing their own instincts, which are that if you give money to rich people, they'll tend to just hold on to it. It's not necessarily going to come back to you. If instead we fairly tax the rich and invest that tax revenue in public goods and services, that's when you're going to see the wealth being spread and working families benefiting.
Absolutely. Will, great stuff. I appreciate the time. Hope folks will check out the website, AmericansForTaxFairness.org. We'll get links out on social media. Great talking with you, my friend. Hope you'll come back and share some more thoughts with us in the future.
Would love to. Thank you very much. This is great.
Good stuff. Will Rice, policy consultant there with the good folks over at Americans for Tax Fairness. Make sure you check out the website, AmericansForTaxFairness.org. That is it. We'll get it out on social media real quick. I had a number of listeners asking, hey, how can we get the podcast? Some good folks over at WCPT AM 820 in Chicago, AM 950s KTNF in Minneapolis. Got some listeners there going, hey, how do we get the podcast? Maybe missed a piece of it, maybe missed a bit of Will's interview, want to go back and hear it. You can get the podcast anywhere podcasts are found, iTunes, Google Play, Art19, Stitcher, you name it, Spotify, all of those places. Or simply just go to thericksmithshow.com. All of those places right there. Just click on the link. You can download the podcast, take it with you on the go, share it with friends, all of that stuff. Never miss a moment. You can also email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. If you've got a question, comment, something on your mind. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. Listen to The Rick Smith Show. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 2000. Just after midnight, 600 police officers clashed with picketing longshoremen in Charleston, South Carolina. The port in Charleston ranked the 4th largest in the United States. While South Carolina is one of the states with the lowest union membership, the port is an exception. The picketers were predominantly African Americans. They were represented by the International Longshoremen's Association, Local 1422 and 1771. That January, a Danish company, Nordana, announced they would unload their ships with non-union labor. The company had used union labor for more than 2 decades. 600 police were on hand to watch over 20 scabs brought in to unload the ships. The police force included helicopters and armored personnel vehicles. The longshoremen held a meeting to discuss their response. A picket of longshoremen was set up at the port. The police violently opposed the picket. They hurled gas grenades and racial epithets. They savagely beat Ken Riley, the president of Local 1422. 5 union members were arrested and charged with felony rioting and faced 5 years in prison despite a lack of evidence. And they were placed under house arrest for more than a year. They became known as the Charleston Five. The South Carolina Attorney General vowed to make an example of these workers. He promised jail, jail, and more jail, and even going as far as comparing them to terrorists. The labor movement in South Carolina and beyond rallied to their defense. Yellow bumper stickers and billboards reading "Free the Charleston Five" could be spotted throughout the state. A plan developed to conduct actions at ports across the world to support these men and their right to picket. Faced with an outpouring of support, South Carolina reduced the charges to a misdemeanor and a $100 fine.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So Meatloaf passed away today. 74 years old. It's reported he contracted coronavirus, became seriously ill, canceled one of his business dinners, and died. And what we know of the Meat, was out there rallying against vaccine mandates, was out there promoting, the Eric Clapton song, the Van Morrison song, the anti-lockdown song. We know on that front, not sure if he was vaccinated or not. I'm kind of thinking probably not. But the reality is 2 out of 3, I guess that's what got him. And I guess there are some things, well, I guess he'd do anything for love, but possibly get vaccinated. It is, and I don't want to make a joke of it. It's sad. But, here you go. Maybe this will wake somebody up. Maybe it's a cautionary tale. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on the latest news on the vaccines. Thanks to Texas. I've asked our good friend Laura Packard to come talk with us and give us some thoughts on what's going on down there. Laura's a stage 4 cancer survivor and the executive director of Healthcare Voter. Laura, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks for having me.
So what do you think of the Meat? I like his music. I'm not fond of the stuff recently, and sad to see him go. But I guess choices, right?
Well, I think it's sad that he thought that it was better to go without this vaccine, and now he's no longer here, and his family has to go on without him when a simple, free vaccine could possibly have saved his life.
And this is one of those things where I know there are probably people out there who listened to the Van Morrison, Eric Clapton song and have looked to him in these anti vaccine rallies and all of this stuff and go, oh no, if he's not doing it, I shouldn't. This is where I struggle with, I want to feel bad for him and his family. I want to feel bad, but there's part of me that goes, maybe this is a message. Maybe this is something that someone go, oh, wait, it could happen to him. Could probably happen to me too. I don't know. I'm just in that weird spot.
Well, this brown-eyed girl believes in vaccines, and I hope that the audiences out there will pay attention and realize that anybody can get sick, and if you're not protected, it could go very badly for you.
Yeah. Now we're in this moment, Laura, and as you know as well as anyone, our Supreme Court shot down Joe Biden's vaccine mandate, which I truly believed from the beginning was going to happen anyway. My concern now is that the president and a lot of people go, you know what? Hey, our hands are tied. There's nothing we can do. And states across this country, Republican legislatures have done everything they can do to hamstring anyone from reacting, and that the rest of us are just going to have to, well, figure out how to get through it.
Well, the Supreme Court struck down the Biden administration's mandate for large businesses that their employees would have to either be vaccinated or get weekly tests. And just today, courts put a hold on the ruling that all federal employees would have to be vaccinated. So we're seeing some of the same elected officials that fought against the Affordable Care Act are now fighting against vaccines and mandates, the very things we need to get out of this pandemic.
It seems kind of weird. I mean, you're fighting against people getting health care and then against them being able to protect them. It seems like the death cult is, that frame of, the GOP being a death cult seems to actually kind of be, well, yeah.
Many Republicans do not care about your health.
That's the bumper sticker right there, isn't it? I mean, at the end of the day, but now we find out, and this is where I've been a little critical of the administration. They're now putting out free tests. There's going to be some masks coming out. There's going to be all of this stuff. And I talked about it earlier. Of course, now that my wife goes and buys a whole bunch of N95 masks and pays a fortune for them, the administration, now we're going to give some free out. And that's good. We need them. But shouldn't this have been something that was done, I don't know, months ago?
Frankly, yes. They in most other countries, tests are easy to come by and they're cheap or free, and masks are provided. And it took getting to this place to finally be able to get tests delivered, and masks will be more good quality, high quality masks, KN95s and N95s will be more available from the administration. But again, they're going to be distributed through pharmacies and community centers, that kind of thing. So that means a lot of people that are homebound, people with disabilities, people with medical conditions may not be able to go out and get them. So I hope that where we wind up is that people can order those masks online, just like you can order the tests.
Well, aren't they being sent also through the Postal Service? I mean, I had a relative recently who sent me a text saying, hey, have you gotten your masks? And she gave me a Postal Service email address. I think it's special.usps.com, where you can go get the testing kits through, and they'll send them through the post office and make sure you get them. And couldn't they use do the masks that way as well?
I hope so, because they already have the infrastructure in place to deliver the tests. I wish that they could have delivered masks with the tests, but that ship has sailed.
See, there you go, thinking again. But here's the thing: why aren't we doing that? I mean, why is it that it seems like we're not being as proactive as we're talking a good game, but we're not getting this stuff out the door? Saying, look. Like I saw a thing. Oh, you can only get 4 of them. Okay, well, yeah, I get that. But how about next week? How about the week after? How about down the road? And look, I think we need to have a commission that if anyone goes and tries to resell these, they should be going to jail. I think we need to have these things in place already months ago. That when this stuff happens, it's all in place. Or do you think that the administration, as I believe, put too much faith in the American people that they would get vaccinated, that they would come around to the reality that people like Meatloaf are going by the wayside because maybe they didn't get vaccinated? Isn't this kind of, do you think that's possibly it?
Well, I think the administration did think that vaccines were going to take care of everything. And maybe they could have if months ago everybody had gotten vaccinated, but the vaccines were slow to roll out, slow for everybody to get them. And then there was this sizable amount of misinformation and various media outlets that are pushing this misinformation, and of course social media too, that wound up with a quarter to a third of this country doesn't believe in vaccines and or masks. And so we've gotten to the point where we're never going to get to the easy way out of this pandemic. And so we're just trying to get through it the best we can.
Some days I just don't know. But back to the Texas court deciding the federal mandate to put a freeze on this. Is it possible that they can? Is it possible they can stop the federal mandate? I mean, didn't already the Supreme Court rule that Biden had the ability to do this on the federal level? How can this lower court decide that?
Well, there's multiple different court cases, and so it gets confusing. So the Supreme Court ruled on two issues. They said that the government can't force large employers to make sure their employees either get tested or vaccinated. And they ruled that the government can make sure that every medical facility that takes federal dollars can mandate that their employees get vaccinated. But this is the third issue. This is all federal employees, so not necessarily healthcare workers, but all federal employees. Can the government insist as a condition of employment that you be vaccinated or not? And it seems pretty clear to me that the government should be able to insist that its employees, follow basic health protocols. But this rogue court put down the injunction, and so we'll see what higher courts have to say about it.
Yeah, do we have a sense of where the Supreme Court will go based on its past rulings? Any sense on where this may go on the federal level?
I mean, it feels like a very corporate friendly court would agree that employers can mandate their employees do things, but we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. No, you hit it on the head, because a lot of people say, oh, it's a conservative court, it's a Trump court. No, this is a corporate court. First and foremost, this is about corporate America and money, and then everything else aside. And while we're talking about the Supreme Court, they came out with the allowing the Texas the law to stay in place, which I was kind of hoping, as extreme as that Texas law is, that they would have pushed back on how crazy that is, but not so much.
This also is news that they did not stop the new Texas law on abortion from going into effect that turns average Texans into bounty hunters, where they can turn in their neighbors. So the courts are moving on this. The Supreme Court hasn't ruled one way or another on the merits. They just failed to stop it from going into effect. So right now it's kicking around in the courts. I believe next it's going to the Texas Supreme Court and then on from there. So there was a way that they could have fast-tracked this, to rule sooner, but instead they're just letting it play out. And that means that hundreds of thousands of Texans cannot get an abortion if they need one.
And see, the problem is that they haven't stepped in this moment. So even if down the road they do, which I doubt they're going to overturn, maybe the weird parts of it, but the 6-week ban, I don't know. I think that they're ready to do away with Roe entirely. But the longer this takes, the more people who are going to be harmed in the process. And that's a problem. Look, I'm not someone who's in favor of abortions. I'm not someone who's out cheerleading them. I'm not pro or anti. Where I am is I'm pro safety. I want my daughters to be safe. I don't want them to have to grow up in the world that their grandmother grew up in, where people were going into back alleys and doing all kinds of things, when the reality is rich women are going to get the care that they need, and it's going to be poor and working class women who are going to be the ones who are going to end up being harmed by this. So the longer this takes, the worse things are. So I find this to be another moment where the Supreme Court has fallen down on the job.
Mm-hmm. And also, speaking of Texas legislators, if they truly cared about working class women in Texas, they would have expanded Medicaid already, because that's hundreds of thousands of Texans that can't afford health insurance right now and can't get it either. And that's because of the negligence of the Texas legislature.
Well, you're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're with Laura Packard. Laura's a stage 4 cancer survivor, also the executive director of Healthcare Voter. Also, you do a TV show, right? Health Talk, right?
Care Talk on Mondays at 4:00 Eastern.
There you go. And that's on ACT TV. And we will get links out on how you can take a look at at Care Talk and the work that Laura does there. I want to also get your thoughts, lastly, on the Build Back Better stuff. There's a lot of stuff in there that I think helpful to poor and working class folks. Sadly, doesn't look like it's going to happen. But Joe Manchin said, I guess it was yesterday, we're back to square one. Everything's off the table. We got a blank sheet of paper. All of that arguing over the math, over is it six trillion, or is it 3.5 trillion, or 2 trillion, or 1, or 14, or 37, or who knows what. We're now back to zero, blank sheet of paper.
Yes. So, I mean, realistically, we live in a world where we can only get what Manchin and Sinema will sign off on. And so they need to be clear about what they will and won't support. And, it's common sense things that we all need, like being able to lower the cost of prescription drugs, being able to lower the cost of health insurance, get millions of Americans health care that can't get it right now, like those people in Texas, for example. So paid family and medical leave, especially during a pandemic. It's a long list of things that were in the original bill, and we'll see what survives. But everything in that bill was important and needed, and will be a loss if we don't have it.
Yeah, most certainly. And the thing that bothers me is, you look at the voting rights bills that Joe Manchin wrote. He wrote the bill. They said, Joe, go write the bill. And Joe wrote the bill. And ultimately, he didn't vote for it. Now you go, oh, well, he voted for the bill, but he voted for no way for it to actually become law. So my fear in this is Joe goes and he writes a horrible bill, and then at the end still doesn't support it. I mean, that's the weird world in which we live. Crazy.
Yeah. But if they do this through reconciliation, then they only need 50 votes. But that's why if they break it up into pieces and they don't do this through reconciliation, we're back to where we were with voting rights, where it rams right into the filibuster and the boat sinks.
I mean, it's insane to me. I mean, it really is insane to me that you got this one moment, Joe. You got this one moment, and you have fallen down. And look, I think it could cost the Democrats mightily in the next year, especially if they don't get something done on voting rights. Or, on this Build Back Better plan, if you're not making people's lives better, if you're not getting things done, they're either not going to show up to the polls, or they're going to throw you out. And it seems that simple. So for me, something on the voting rights has to happen, and then something on this front has to happen as well. But sadly, I don't see the money to help childhood poverty. I don't see a lot of the things that need to get done on climate change getting done, all because, well, one guy from West Virginia.
Well, they were elected to help people, not to help procedure.
There you go.
And so they're choosing to defend this arcane rule that isn't even dating to the founding of the Republic or anything like that. So they're choosing to die on the hill of paperwork, of footnotes, instead of doing what they were elected by the people of West Virginia and elsewhere to do, and that's to make America better.
That is absolutely it. Laura, I appreciate the time as always. Great talking with you. Keep up the great work that you do. And Care Talk Mondays, 4 p.m. Eastern on ACT TV. We'll get links out on how you can take a look at that. Laura, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you.
Good stuff. Our good friend Laura Packard. Make sure you check out her show, Care Talk. ACT TV, 4 p.m. We'll get links out. Quick, Jenna from Brooklyn Park, Minnesota, who sent me an email listening on KTNF AM 950. Said, Rick, loved the show, but too late. I need your energy on the way to work, not on the way home. Do you put out a podcast? And I said, yes. She said, where? I said, everywhere. She said, love you, brother, lifelong UFCW member. You can get the podcast anywhere. Take the program on the go, wherever you go. It's always there, always available, always available to be turned on or turned off, preferably on. But go to thericksmithshow.com, and that's where you can find all the places where we put our podcast, and I'm sure one of them is your favorite. Again, if you missed any of our program, the podcast, best place to get it, thericksmithshow.com is where you go. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Make sure you follow us on social media at Rick Smith Show. Also on Twitter, they're at Rick Smith Show. Facebook, YouTube, like, subscribe, share, all of that stuff. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
I never dreamed of growing up to be a political activist commentator, but here I am, and it worked out pretty well for me. I've been lucky enough to have a voice in public matters and eke out a modest living running my mouth as an independent populist agitator. Still, I have to confess to the sin of job envy. Not in the sense of being resentful, but regretful about my own inability to lift the trade of journalistic commentary to the heights attained by a small, feisty collection of unique public opinionators, political cartoonists. In framing issues and rallying people to think and act, these journalists have an unfair advantage over us mere word crafters. They can literally draw a picture to make their point. They reach masses viscerally as well as cerebrally, and visceral usually outpunches cerebral. Editorial cartooning is a profession made up largely of progressive mavericks who enter the social, political, cultural fray with an abundance of anti-establishment audacity, an eye for irony, fondness for the underdog, and an ability to laugh at absurdity, plus artistic talent. Because cartooning is an expression of the human spirit that's been irrepressible since cave drawings, generation after generation of pen and ink champions of democracy blossomed. The general public's appreciation and demand for the cartoonist's unblinking honesty and satire have never flagged, even increasing whenever the artists come under public assault by autocrats, plutocrats, screwballs, and assorted other censors. These graphic editorial artists matter. Again and again, they've roused the public to rise up and put down corporate and political scoundrels, incrementally advancing our nation's democratic possibilities. As in the natural world, though, even the most beneficial creatures can be driven to extinction. This is Jim Hightower saying, check your own local newspaper. Are your favorite cartoonists still there? The Hightower Radio Lowdown is brought to you by the Lowdown Happy Hour, live streamed from the Chat and Chew Cafe.